Thank you so much, Marguerite, and the community of practice for giving us the opportunity to share with you today. So yes, as mentioned, there are new food safety standards coming into effect on the 12th of February for certain commodities within Australia. So my name's Sussanah Roelofsz. I'm the Technical Officer for Fresh Produce Safety Centre, and online, thank you very much, is our CEO, Sussanah, and our Events and Communications Officer, Jodie, as well, just listening in. So SP, I will try write mine up very quickly to give you more time because you're probably more important in what you're covering. So just in case you did not know who we were, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We were established 10 years ago, and we're all about facilitating connection and collaboration across the industry in fresh produce, but across Australia and New Zealand as well. We host a number of food safety events, and we also provide free resources for growers as well. So certainly to your point where you're seeing that notable difference between your average growers and those that have resources, we are hoping to target some of those smaller to medium-sized growers that don't have the technical resource in-house. I won't go through these in too much detail, but if you do have an opportunity to visit our website, or please do point any growers in the direction of us. We have a number of resources freely available to growers. The most comprehensive would be our guidelines for fresh produce food safety. It's a 120-page document which really outlines from growing to retail all food safety practices. But we've also condensed these into one-pager food safety grower guides together with New South Wales DPIRD as well. And they're available in 6 languages. So we're trying to also introduce some multilingual aspects to what we share, so that we can really have that good outreach. We are currently running a 3-year project on food safety, and this is where the PPP standards come in, is that we're actually supporting some of those growers in implementing the standards. We ourselves have a community of practice, so we've got 85 members currently, and also want to encourage more grower representation in there. So if you do have anybody that you work with that has an interest in food safety and would like to join, please do reach out to myself as well. So heading into the primary production and processing standards, they do come into effect in 2 weeks' time or less than. Who do they apply to? They do apply to primary producers. So anybody growing and harvesting leafy veg, melons, and berries. There is already a standard that exists for sprouts. So this is additional commodities that are now being regulated from this year. It also includes primary processors, so any businesses that are washing, trimming, sorting, sanitizing, storing, packing, or transporting these products, they also are covered under these standards. What it does not apply to is retail or manufacturing, so any further processed products. So Anthony, I think you mentioned you had some of yours that you're working with for further processing. As a grower, they'd be implicated potentially if they were doing these commodities, but if they're further processing, they're not. I'll go through these very quickly, but on the fresh leafy veg side, it's basically any commodity that is being consumed raw. So that's where they've identified there's a potential risk when these standards came into play. And just want to point out, spring onion sometimes gets lost, so that's actually included. But what's not included is actually celery and leek. So they're just some of the ones that have had a few questions around what's in and what's out. For the berries, it's all strawberries, blueberries, and all the those belonging to the rubus, which includes your blackberries and raspberries as well. For melons, it's all your watermelon, your rock melon, honeydew melon, and your piel de sapo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Had to look that one up. And so it's basically all varieties of melon. SP can correct me later. Really good point of information. If you do have growers that don't even know about the standards at this stage, please do point them either in our direction or also the Food Standards Australia, New Zealand. There's a QR code. We will circulate this shortly. They are the ones that actually host the standards that will be coming into effect, but they've also created some really useful resources such as the info bites, videos, and also a safe horticulture manual, giving some really good examples and case studies for those that are implementing the standards. Really high level, these are the 12 elements of the standards that come into effect. There's a real focus on having a general food safety management system that is risk-based. So it goes back to identifying what are the risks associated with the way that you grow, or what the product that you're using, and the inputs that you're putting into your product as well. Also, a big focus on traceability, so where the product is grown, but also having traceability records, one forward, one backwards as well. Also included in the elements of the standard is control of all external factors that may introduce contamination that would make product unsafe or unsuitable, and how these are managed by a business. You'll see here that some of these elements have a asterisk on them. These are not required for berries. I do have some extra slides that Marguerite has, and she'll circulate just around the best practice for each of these elements. We won't have time to go through today, but please do feel free to share them. They're based on FSAN's best practice as well. So what can you encourage your growers to do if they are not aware of the standards coming in? Please get them to contact, first and foremost, probably New South Wales DPIRD. If they're working across multi-states, get them to contact other states and territories to see what the requirements are, or ourselves if they have any questions as well. If they are on an existing food safety scheme, some are recognising the likes of Fresh Care or BRCGS or Safe Quality Food. If it is recognised as an equivalent, then all they need to do is register. However, if they have no food safety scheme, then they will have to go through a verification with their local government, state or territory. I'd really suggest that they go through the standards, create an action plan for any of the gaps that they've identified. But ongoing, it's all about monitoring, having records to show that you are actually following your food safety management plan, and making sure that it is regularly reviewed if there's any changes to any of the risks in your inputs or your surrounding neighborhood or your growing methods as well. Encourage growers to attend workshops, even yourselves, if you're very keen to stay up to date with changes, the help desks and the resources, an open invitation to join our community as well, and really get them to reach out for technical advice. So I'll end off here with just the peak industry bodies that are also actively working with their growers to as advocacy as well, but get them, if they are in contact with their peak industry bodies, to get some advice as well. And I'll let SP talk more to the melons and leafy veg as well.
Thanks. Okay, SP, over to you.
Thanks for the opportunity to share the work that we have been doing in leafy vegetable and melon space. So this presentation is part of our Safe Leafy Veg program that has been running for a couple of years now. Just to give you a bit of background, that as Sussanah mentioned, the horticulture has been probably running on volunteer QA programs for 30 years now. But from 2025, this year, new standards are coming for leafy greens, melons, and berries. Just to give you a background, how and why these standards come in place. So these primary production and processing standards, they exist for different types of agri-food sectors like seafood, poultry, meat, dairy, and egg. Horticulture is new to them, but the seed sprout standards were already there. So these standards are developed by Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, which is FSAN. So they were legislated in August 2022, and they gave this time for implementation planning. So they're coming into effect from 12th of Feb 2025. And these standards are enforced by respective state or territory food or health regulators. So standards are developed by a federal agency, which is FSAN, but they are enforced by respective state agencies. So there are two pathways proposed for enforcement of these standards. These two pathways are national. The first pathway is the growers who have an existing food safety scheme, which should be GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative benchmarked. They need to register with their regulator along with the fees. The second pathway is those growers who don't have an existing food safety scheme, Fresh Care, or any other equivalent scheme. They must have a food safety management statement for leafy veg and melons. And then regulators will conduct audits and inspections on their properties. again, there will be fee for service. So in Australia, all states and territories, they will generally do things differently. So some of the requirements could vary slightly. Fee structures are different. Implementation methodologies are also slightly different. For example, in Western Australia, State Health Department will be enforcing through local governments or councils. Victoria, Agriculture Victoria is the regulator. Queensland is Safe Food Production Queensland. And in New South Wales, we have Food Authority, which will be the regulator to go to if you have any questions regarding this standard. So in New South Wales, the Food Act, which is New South Wales Food Regulation, which is currently in place, 2015, this legislation is due to be repealed on 1st of September 2025. It means Food Authority is currently doing an overhaul of their existing legislation. So in the new regulation, they are introducing new standards for horticulture. So this regulation, the draft was circulated for public consultation, closed on 22nd of December. So they are going to review, and legislative changes are currently underway. That means it looks like from Feb 2025, we will not have implementation of the new standards in New South Wales because legislation is still not in place.
Oh, okay.
So New South Wales food safety, there are different types of schemes: dairy, egg, meat, plant product, seafood, and vulnerable persons food safety schemes. So the new standards like berries, leafy veg, and melons have been incorporated in an existing scheme, which was for plant products. That scheme already had seed sprouts, fresh cut, unpasteurized juices, and vegetables in oil. So there was already a scheme existing, so which will have these horticulture products as part of that scheme. So if you want to go to New South Wales Food Authority's webpage, there's a dedicated page for that, and you can actually register to receive updates on the new standard. So I have provided the link where you can have more information on these standards. And as Sussanah shared, there are a lot of resources from federal agency FISAN on these standards. Just a few things that I thought people on the ground should know about PPP standards, especially in New South Wales. These standards are designed for primary production, which means growers and processors or packers. However, there are some technicalities. The new standard also covers transportation of fresh produce from grower to processing facilities or packing facilities or between packing facilities. So it means, especially in New South Wales, they have made clear that transport vehicles, they will be covered under this new standard. It means these vehicles, they have to be audited, inspected, and licensed every year for transportation of fresh produce, which will be like all these three commodities that are being regulated. So I thought this is just for your information. Wholesalers generally should not be in these standards, but if they are involved in washing, trimming, sorting, sanitizing, storing, or even combining harvested produce, if they're repacking something in markets or transporting between primary processing premises, if a wholesale business is doing those activities or any of those activities, they will be covered under the standard. So these are just two sort of nitty-gritties that should be sort of understood. I'm not going to go into details. So these three standards, leafy veg and melons, they have very similar requirements in terms of there are like 12 elements for each standard. Berries, they're a bit less onerous compared to the other two. So if you look at the standard, any document like a legislation, the standard is just written in 2 pages, very simple language, but this is legal language. And things like there are keywords used in the standard like unacceptable, growers should take reasonable measures, must ensure that product remains safe. So if you just go back to the original document of the legislation, the standards are written in very plain language, but it is legal language. So unacceptable means a lot in legal term. So you must take reasonable measures. Did you take reasonable measures? So I think some of those things, they look quite simple, but they mean a lot in terms of if you go into technicality of those keywords. So in our leafy veg project, we have been engaging growers, and we have been looking at where are those microbial food safety issues, what is their nature and magnitude of those issues. And we have been collecting a lot of data from production, harvest, and post-harvest stages, looking at the roots of contamination, how it happens, and then doing some interventions at farm level and processing facilities to see how change in practice can bring in results. And we are developing a best practice guidance for that. So just to give you a bit of quickly, just let you know that we have been engaging with a lot of growers. So by now we would have engaged more than 100 growers nationally, and most of them, they are medium to large scale, but we have also reached out to some small growers across Australia. And when we engage with growers, we collect a lot of samples. So far we have almost collected 3,000 samples with around 12,000 microbial assays conducted in the lab. And we have been looking at all different types of vegetables, different types of production systems, and whole range of another production and processing aspects to see where are the issues and what are those issues. Just to give you an overview, the major issue that we found so far is in water, whether it's irrigation water or post-harvest processing water. So we have really found a lot of microbial hazards or issues in water, followed by premises, processing facilities, and packing facilities. They are not up to mark. Produce is also, there's contamination coming through with produce from farm to packing facilities, and they are also coming in the supply chain. And then soil was, though it was supposed to be rated quite high, we didn't get much success in terms of seeing contamination in soil and also equipment. So these are some of the areas that we want to focus in terms of compliance with the upcoming standards, because these are the issues which are going to actually bug the growers in near future when regulators would have access to those farms and processing facilities for various reasons. So I just want to highlight a few things that you probably, those who are on the ground, should be relevant. First of all is agriculture water quality, which is really, really important. And then soil and crop nutrition, especially use of animal products in leafy green production. And then extreme weather events like flooding or dust storms and heavy rainfall, those really impact food safety. And then wildlife and livestock proximity. So these are sort of top 4 issues that at pre-harvest stage, which would cause issues in compliance. Similarly, in post-harvest, temperature management, especially for small and medium enterprise, they don't have proper cooling and facilities or even cold storage on farm, because the new standard requires temperature management to a great deal, washing and sanitization, and then traceability. I mentioned there, small and medium enterprises, they are really not good at maintaining those records, and also the requirements of labeling and packing, they are not in place. So there's a lot of product that goes to market that cannot be traced back to those growers. So traceability is an important element even in post-harvest stage. And skills and knowledge. So that's a huge shortage of skills and knowledge about food safety practices. So I thought I'll just give a quick wrap of what are the foreseeable compliance issues that you're going to see on the ground. Growers without a GFSI food safety scheme, those who don't have any scheme, that is an issue. And compliance costs, of course, it will add to costs. So costs can vary from few $100s if you already have a GFSI scheme to few $1,000s if you don't have a scheme in place, because food regulators are going to have fee for service. It's approximately $200 to $300 an hour for inspection on farms. So since Food Authority is revising their legislation, now I could not access. So we will see in the final legislation how much the fees comes out. So the issues that probably people on the ground that can look for is pre-harvest water quality. It's really, really important to do risk assessment of that water. Surface water quality changes very frequently, and especially during summers. We have data from 12 water sources across Australia, mainly rivers and creeks, and we are seeing huge increase in levels of E. coli and pathogens in December, January, especially summer months, and also after weather events like flooding and heavy rainfall. Second is organic soil amendments. Food Authority has made it very clear that they will be enforcing there should not be any use of raw untreated products. It's written on their website. So though there's a bit of debate in this area on exclusion periods, depending upon the standards, but I think Food Authority's position is pretty clear on the use of raw untreated manures in these regulated commodities. However, there's unrestricted use of compost allowed in these standards. And coming to the post-harvest temperature management, as I said, inadequate pre-cooling and cold storage infrastructure, and transport vehicle, they have to be licensed in New South Wales. And we are not sure how other states are going to manage this, but Food Authority has made it clear that in plant product scheme, all transport vehicles should be licensed. And drinking quality water for post-harvest processes. If you're washing or sanitizing or even cooling produce using water, it has to be drinking quality. And they have included additional wash water testing requirements for leafy veg and melons in New South Wales draft legislation. And similarly, other issues like having coexistence of livestock and horticulture, you should have safe buffer zones and drainage. These are really important. When I said you must take reasonable measures to make product safe. So it means if there's no safe buffer zone between an animal operation and horticulture, if there's no proper drainage, it means the grower did not take reasonable measure to grow product safely. Similarly, extreme weather events, that's another thing that is highlighted in the legislation. So our team we have been engaging growers throughout the country, and we have been offering this help desk service. We have received hundreds of inquiries around standards and how to manage the risks on farm. And while we deal with a lot of R&D, but we also do microbiological survey. So I just want to share with you that this particular farm was on board in our program for last 2 years. And you can see from mid-2022 to late 2024, we did not have any detection of pathogen from that particular farm. And all of a sudden in December or late November, we saw a few detections of pathogens. And those detections actually amplified towards Christmas. And then we responded and worked with the farm and managed to trace back. And actually we found the source of contamination and how it was occurring. And you can see the graph, and then we restored them back toward the new year. So we think this could have been a major issue during Christmas, causing an outbreak. So this is the sort of value that project brings to industry. Just the final words that we all should understand that going into regulatory landscape, it's a tough game. So now you will have regulators oversight on all scales of growers. If I put it in layman language, growing and supplying leafy veg, melons, and berries without regulators' notification and registration would be illegal. So it's okay for personal consumption, but if you grow and supply, it's basically illegal. You need a license, you need to have registration. So we are shifting from auditor's approach to auditor and regulator, and we are actually focusing from individual farm. We need to look at the whole area. So we need to do it more work in Greater Sydney. I'll just give you an example. For example, for Lockyer Valley, we did a regional profiling because we are doing this for all the major leafy green production areas. So the green part is this Lockyer Valley, for example, is really great in terms of predominantly vegetable industry. They have very little livestock in that area where most of the leafy veg comes, and they use compost. We didn't see use of any raw manure in the valley, the farms that we went around, and they use groundwater. So all these things are like positive for leafy green production in that valley, but they also have some issues like heavy soils, which promotes pathogen survival and equipment contamination, and then flooding and heavy rainfall. So we have been working on farms, collecting data from individual farms, and then generating regional picture. And toward the end of this project, you will have a national picture where this leafy green industry stands. So I think in future, you will see the major issues that we foresee is like water and weather conditions and wildlife and animals and their products, especially organic products, those who are using untreated. So that's it. So I just thought I should share with you this picture where this particular farm, you can see It has issues with wildlife. They have a dairy farm in their proximity. It's prone to flooding. They had groundwater contamination after flooding. So this particular farm had all the issues that you could imagine from food safety, and they have been on board in this project and dealing with them one by one. So in those cases, it's really hard to manage food safety if your groundwater gets contaminated. So these are the sort of challenges that are ahead when you are talking about a new regulation coming in place. So anyway, I would like to thank funding agency, Hot Innovation, AUSVEG, and VegNet teams have been wonderful throughout the country wherever we are operating. So yeah, this is my team, which does the work in the field and the lab, the contractors, and whole range of people there on board. And many thanks for this opportunity to share some of this work, and happy to take questions.